Hello and welcome to this video tutorial series, Getting Started with Gluware. If you're taking the test drive, you will be able to follow along using the instance set up for you. If you're interested in taking the test drive, go to gluware.com/test-drive. Here in part 2 of using the Device Manager app, we're going to highlight the Device Explorer, including how to customize the view, search, sort, filter, and more. So let's get started. I'm going to sign into my Gluware instance. I have navigated back into the last app I was in, which does happen to be Device Manager, but from a navigation standpoint, if you float over the left-hand menu, you can select the application to navigate into. In this case, we are using Device Manager. One other quick note is that you want to be sure you're in the proper organization. If you click the down arrow from your org selector, you can ensure you're in the correct org. In this case, I'm using Test Drive Pod 1. The organizations you see are really dependent on your role-based access and what you've been allowed to view there. Also, I can see that I'm signed in, and here is my user, and I could sign out from here if I need to. Let's get started with Device Explorer. Device Explorer is a very important component of Gluware because it is in many of the applications, including Device Manager, which we're in now. It's also used in Config Drift and Audit, OS Manager, and Data Explorer. One important point to note about Device Explorer as you switch between applications. So here we are in Device Manager, and I have this Device Explorer up. And if I look at my views and actions, I have actions and views as well as the columns available are very specific to Device Manager. Device Explorer changes its personality or its context sensitive based on where you navigate. If I navigate over to Config Drift and Audit and I go to the device view, I have the Device Explorer on the bottom again, but you'll notice the actions and views are different, as well as many of the columns I have available to me are different as well. There's a lot that are consistent. There are others that are specific to the app, like here in Config Drift, I can see my drift status, for example. So you'll want to be conscious of that, and that sometimes, because the apps look similar, when you want to note what app you're in, and then you'll notice that the Device Explorer has a different personality based on where you've navigated to. So let's navigate back into Device Manager, as it's one of the starting points. Hopefully you've already watched part 1 and understood the various ways you can add devices. So let's take a look at becoming a power user of Device Explorer. One of the things I want to quickly note for you is that if the screen is rendering, let's say, too big or too small for your preferred view, you can go up and use a browser zoom in, zoom out. So I can zoom in the browser to make it larger, or if I have a large monitor and I want to see more on the screen, I can zoom out. So it's kind of a power tip, or power user tip, is to customize the browser zoom in, zoom out to see what you want to see, or maximize what you want to see on the UI, since it will frame it based on your zoom in, zoom out on your browser window. Okay, so now here in Device Explorer, let's go through a couple of the things to help, again, make you a power user. One of the most important things, or one of the things to start with, is the column ordering, or the order of the grid. And you can control the order of the columns in 2 different ways. One is hitting the cog selector and using this menu to turn on and off the various views that are shown. I do want to highlight here also that several of the elements here are really contingent on if you're using a feature or not. I'll give you an example. Configured info, configured type, configured by. These items will only be populated if you are enabling syslog. As I scroll down here, there are a number of other items here like contract end, and EOX bulletin. All of these are related if you're using the Cisco API integration, which we're going to highlight in another video. So that's one thing you're going to want to note, that not all of the columns and data will be applicable. It really depends on how you're using Gluware. But I will highlight, let's say you're not using a field like description and you want to get that real estate back. You can just unclick it and hide the view. You also have the ability to change the order here in this drop down. So if I want to see IP address after name, I can just drag and drop up that and it reorders my view. This is a very important thing, and if you're looking at my user interface or another demonstration and you're not seeing the same fields, it's likely that you want to enable or disable those fields or change the order to see what you want to see in your grid. One other element of the grid is that you can drag and drop. So back to, I have name, I have IP address, I have host name. I can drag and drop things over as well. But here's another good example of why I might want to customize. The name field is a required field when you're adding a device. So this is user input. The host name is discovered from the devices. And so because these are pretty much the same, you may only want name or host name in your view. So I can just come in here, turn off name. I'll stick with host name since it's the configured name on the device, and I'll stick with that. Also, as you scroll to the right here, you may get lost in the context. Like, let's say I'm looking here and I see, oh, this device was discovered today, where these other devices haven't been updated since yesterday. What device is this? I've lost my context. So if I scroll back over, let's just say I want the host name or really any of these columns to stay in view. I can come up under the name and click on the lock icon. That lock will lock it to the left column view. And now when I scroll to the right, I don't lose. I know which device. So if I can see this 1228 device was updated, I can see that was spoke 1. So that's important as well. Speaking about updating data in the grid, the data will update when you trigger a discovery or when in other applications like config drift and audit or configuration management, when you're executing a provision or executing a drift or other activities, Gluware will update the discovered data. Every time we interact with the device, we will refresh the data we are pulling from it. But just to give you an example, again, as a quick refresher, if I select one or more devices or I hit Control A to select all, I can update the discovered data in the grid and understand the latest information from the network. Most of this data is not going to change, like the vendor is not going to change, the operating system's not going to change. The OS version may change. If you've conducted an OS upgrade or downgrade, that could potentially change. Your SKU's not going to change. The uptime stat will get refreshed. So this is not a real-time view of the uptime. It is the last time this was captured. So I can see a lot of these devices have been up for a long time. This N9K, the Cisco data center switch, was rebooted more recently, but it has been up for a long time as well. I can see Discovery is updating on all those devices, and when it completes, I'll have the latest data updated across all my devices. Moving on, one thing that's probably pretty obvious, but right under the column labels, you have a little arrow key, and you can click on the arrow to reorder your grid based on that selection. So oftentimes I want to order by vendor, so I can put in alphabetical order of the vendors deployed. Another useful sorting is to group by the operating system. Oftentimes you're doing things in groups based on operating systems. You may want to group by your OS version, so you can see all your OS versions together. And just numerous examples of why you would want to reorder or resort the data. Let's go ahead and switch it back to alphabetical order by vendor. So that's ordering of the columns. Another useful capability is the group by, because many of our customers are automating hundreds to thousands or even tens of thousands of devices. You need mechanisms to deal with scale. When you're looking through your inventory, you're trying to find that needle in the haystack. So the group by is a really useful mechanism to say, like, group by access status. In this case, all of my devices are accessible, so they're all okay. But if I wanted to very quickly identify my devices that were not accessible, I could use the access status grouping. Let's clear that, and let's take a look at grouping by OS version. Here I can see that my breakdown of operating system versions, and I see the count next to it as well. This is also very useful, especially when you have projects going on where you are upgrading or trying to get consistency in terms of running all common devices at the same operating system level. Another very useful one is, if I clear that, is to search by vendor and just go by vendor. Gluware supports over 40 operating systems. You may want to group and see across, how many devices you have by each vendor. Another good filter is by type, so you can see how many routers, campus switches, data center switches, firewalls, load balancers you might have. So again, just various ways to view your data, and that's the group by. Another powerful utility here you have is the ability to search and filter. That is accessible here. And one thing to note is this is kind of a dual purpose bar or feature here. And that when I click on filter, I get a text-based filter, and I can type any text in here like Cisco, and it will filter, it will look across all of the grid elements and show me the match here as well. Or I can insert in a number value like 16.9. And so now it has filtered my inventory to show me just the devices that meet here. So this is your search bar to search across your inventory. And you can tick this box and do more complicated regex enabled searching. So let's go ahead and clear that filter. The next thing to highlight is that instead of clicking on the filter icon, if you click on the drop down, you get our advanced filter. And using the advanced filter, you can enter a number of conditions that you want to search for. So I want to look for my operating system equals iOS. And, right, so I want to add a rule, and OS version equals 16.6.5, right? So I can build out a rule set here and apply it, and it will filter my inventory for all the devices that match that filter. I can see the filters enabled, therefore I have a filtered view. And if I just come up here, I can keep expanding this filter, or I can reset and just go back to reset and apply, and I go back to my full inventory. So that's very, very useful in terms of trying to find the needle in the haystack, or when you're searching through your inventory, when you're trying to identify devices or look through to find specific conditions that are happening. One additional powerful search capability I want to highlight is using the advanced filter. You can search configuration data by searching your snapshot data. So what you want to look for, latest snapshot. The latest snapshot is the latest configuration snapshot. You can use begins with, contains. So let's do begins with. And let's say I want to look through my inventory for devices configured for BGP using Cisco syntax. So I'll say router BGP, and I'll hit apply. So that just filtered through all the configurations and highlighted that these 4 devices have the statement router BGP in the configuration. If I want to see that data or see that configuration, you can double click into any device, and then on the top level view, make sure you're looking at the view for the configuration, the eyeball looking icon, and then you have your full configuration here. Now, using your configuration, you can scroll through and ensure that it does have the router BGP statement. Here's the router BGP that caused the match. We're going to look at another feature in the next video around ad hoc query, where we can do more complex searching across config and operational state. So take a look at the next video for that. So let's go ahead and clear this filter. So I'm going to reset and apply. And I just want to talk about a few other items that you're going to see here in Device Explorer. One of the items added in Gluware 5.0 is your Site Explorer. If you click on the changing of the view to your Site Explorer, you're going to see the navigation change from Device Explorer over to Site Explorer. So this is an important component, and this will be covered in the topology tutorial, since this the site data and Site Explorer is really a component of our topology in terms of mapping data into sites and locations. So we're not going to cover that in this video. Let's switch back to Device Explorer. One of the things that's kind of useful, though, if you have defined site data, you can click on this icon to add the sites into your view. And these become filters. If I've assigned devices to sites, I could click on Los Angeles or I could click on Sacramento and see those sites. So let's take this to use one more feature I'd like to highlight. So I'm going to arrange by operating system version here. And I want to take these particular devices, so my hub 1 and 2 and spokes 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all part of a logical topology. And so I want to take these devices and assign them to a site. So we're going to use a capability that you have in your actions, which is multi-edit. So this is where you're selecting one or more devices, and you come over to your actions and you use this icon for edit devices. So now I'm going to change the site path to Los Angeles and hit save. Now I've performed this multi-edit and all of those devices are assigned into the Los Angeles location. Now when I click on the filter exposed here for Los Angeles, I see those devices. This is kind of showing two features at once, which is once you're using Site Explorer and you're beginning to map devices into sites, you can also use the filtered view here to see that. And I'll click back to my overall view. I'll kind of turn off that filter and I'll hide this again. So it's quite a useful view. There are other actions you can perform here. I'll cover them quickly in that we have already executed discovery or updated device discovery, so you've seen this run. This next icon we're going to be covering in a subsequent video here around updating external API data or support data. This is the Cisco and NIST integration. We'll be talking about that. We've already covered add device in the previous video. We just used multi-select. You have a clone feature, so if you are adding devices manually that are similar, you can select an existing device, clone it, and then edit it to make it your new device. This next icon is for running an ad hoc query. Select one or more devices and run a query. We're going to cover that in another video. This next icon is to execute a reboot. So note that you have to have the role-based access control to perform that, since it could potentially be a disruptive action. But we know that in operations, sometimes to resolve issues, you need to reboot devices. And so you have the ability to select one or more devices and then come up and then execute that reboot. The next icon is for network discovery, which we showed in the first video of Device Manager. Next is import devices, which we've shown, and export devices, which we've shown. And the next icon is for running a report. Just keep in mind that executing that icon is going to run the default report. And you can go to Data Explorer and change what your default report is. But that if you have a frequent report you run when you're in Device Manager, you can associate that with this run button and then get that data out, and each time you click on that button. We also have the delete icon. The trash is if you can select one or more devices and hit the trash, you can delete devices out. I do want to give you a little bit of warning or caution there, is that when you delete out those devices, this Device Explorer is synchronizing through the system, so you will be deleting those devices out of all of the Gluware applications. So you want to be careful with device delete. Be sure that you really want to delete that device. That really covers what we wanted to highlight here in this video with the Device Explorer. Hopefully it enables you to become more of a power user and use Device Explorer across many of the Gluware applications. Thanks again for your interest, and hopefully you're continuing your journey on getting started with Gluware and hopefully following along in the test drive. Thank you.